Story 1. I worked in the radiology department of a hospital in Cardiff, Wales, UK for about 3 years as an admin and clerical officer before getting a promotion in medicine. During those 3 years, I saw a lot, from patients dying in the MRI scanners to people getting x-rays for bizarre reasons, like inserting a meat thermometer into their urethra. Nights always seemed to be the craziest. Once, a patient came in with armed police after a knife altercation in the city center, and the person he fought with happened to be there getting an x-ray too. That led to another brawl right in front of me. Chairs were thrown, a trash bin or two, and even a wheelchair. I've seen a lot of things, some funny, some stressful, some sad, and many just plain bonkers. But one night, something genuinely scary happened. I usually started my night shift around 7 p.m. and worked until 8:30 a.m. the next morning. That was the standard night shift for our department, with 3 nights in a row before getting 4 days off. By the 3rd night, you were ready to sleep for a week. But this was my first night of the 3, so I wasn't tired at all. The shift began like any other. I arrived at the department, took over from the day staff, and logged into my PC. During the downtime between patients, we'd usually set up our phones or tablets to watch movies or the latest TV shows. The first few hours were uneventful, just your typical night in radiology. Then it was time for my break. Before I go on, I should probably explain the layout of this hospital. It's the largest in Wales, a teaching hospital, and it's pretty old. The quickest way to get from A to B is through what we call the tunnels, or catacombs. These are dimly lit corridors filled with old, abandoned rooms, tunnels, and other creepy, decrepit areas. The morgue is also down there, so it's not a place you want to be, especially not in the middle of the night. But it's the fastest route if you're staff. There have always been rumors and whispers about strange things happening in those tunnels. Some people say they've seen ghosts in old-fashioned porter uniforms, pushing wheelchairs to pick up patients. Others claim they've seen shadows following them out of the corner of their eyes. One person even said they were attacked by someone wearing a nurse's uniform from the 70s. The place is creepy, even on a good day. But it never really fazed me. I'd been down there hundreds of times, and the worst thing that ever happened to me was getting a sluice pipe dripping human waste on my head, which was its own kind of horror show. But that night, something entirely different happened. Something that didn't seem like it was of this physical world. Like I said, it had been a quiet night. I'd been watching the latest series of One Piece because I'm a geek during my downtime. Then a radiographer, or radiology technician for my American friends, came to cover me for my break. I decided to head to the 5th floor where the sanctuary, a multi-faith chapel, was located. On a night shift, it's one of the most peaceful places in the hospital. But to get there, I had to walk through the tunnels to reach the nearest elevator. I set off on my journey, which usually took about 15 minutes. I scanned my key card at the entrance to the tunnels and started walking through. 2 minutes in, I began to feel like someone was walking behind me. It's a busy hospital, and the tunnels are like a highway, so I didn't think much of it. Suddenly, I heard panting, like someone was trying to catch their breath after a sprint. I turned around to check, but there was nothing there. It was a bit strange, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just one of the pipes creaking or a generator humming. I kept walking, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. Out of sheer confusion and fear, I missed my turn toward the elevators and found myself in a part of the tunnels I'd never been in before. The area was littered with old stretchers, beds, hospital furniture, and equipment. Some of it looked like it had been there for over 50 years, just left to decay in this dark, smelly, decrepit corridor. That's when I started to really freak out. I realized I was lost. It felt like I'd stumbled into the back rooms, everything looked the same, and I couldn't find my way out. I could feel the tightening in my chest, the start of a panic attack. I clutched my chest and ran down the corridor, desperately trying to find a sign or something to tell me where I was. The sense that something was watching me grew stronger. Suddenly, I felt something hit my arm with force, like someone had swung a baseball bat at me. I fell to the ground, dragging myself toward the cold, dusty wall. I looked around frantically, trying to figure out what had just happened. That's when I saw it. About 20 meters away, hovering in the middle of the corridor, was a black mist with glowing red eyes. Was this the thing that had been stalking me the entire time? I jumped to my feet and sprinted. I ran through what felt like 100 different corridors until I finally found a housekeeper or janitor. He saw how pale I was and asked what was wrong, but I couldn't get any words out. Then he grabbed my arm with a firm grip and said, "Did you see it too?" That was the last time I ever stepped foot in the tunnels. To this day, I still hear rumors about strange things down there, but I'm not sure what I saw that night. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was stressed, or maybe it was something else. But why else would the janitor ask if I'd seen it too? What else is lurking down there? One thing's for sure, I'm not going back to find out. Thanks for taking the time to read this. Story 2. When I was about 6 years old, I had this rock star plush that I got from Build-A-Bear. But she wasn't the one I originally wanted, so I grew to hate her. Out of the trio that was released, she was by far the ugliest. I remember having to take her with me whenever I hung out with the kids my mom babysat. Her purple color, my absolute least favorite, made her look creepy, like there was nothing behind her eyes, but in a sinister way. As time went on, I started neglecting the plush. I'd throw her against the wall and eventually locked her away in my parents' closet. I was terrified of her. She had a push-activated voice box in her paw, and one night I heard it going off from the closet. My heart sank. Later that night, I had a nightmare, and she was the star of it. In the dream, I was sleeping in my bed when the closet door was locked and slowly creaked open. I could see her hanging there, lifeless but somehow menacing. I gasped, and the door slammed shut. I don't remember what happened immediately after, but eventually, I got up to check the closet. As I opened it, the door swung wide, and she tackled me. There I was, pinned under a plushie with full strength. I don't recall exactly how the fight played out, but I ended up strangling her to death in the dream. The next day, I threw the plush away, but even now, I'm still scared of her. Story 3. In 2011, I had just moved out of my mom's house and was living with my best friend from high school. After a few months, she developed this habit of barging into my room. She'd jump on my bed or yank off my blanket to wake me up. One morning, I woke up to something jumping on my bed. Still half asleep, I tried to stretch out my legs to kick her off, but I couldn't move them. It felt like something was pressing down hard on my ankles. Chills ran through my body as the jumping continued, but when I looked, no one was there. Finally, the pressure on my ankles lifted, and I panicked. I fell out of bed and ran out of the apartment, not even bothering to put on clothes. It was 7 a.m., and I was standing outside in my underwear, too freaked out to care. After a few minutes, I managed to muster up the courage to go back inside. Walking into my room, I felt a nervous tension in the air. My eyes were immediately drawn to my bed, where I saw 2 indentations on the blanket, close together. The weird part? When I fell out of bed, the blanket didn't move at all. It was like whatever had been jumping on the bed was still there, holding the blanket in place. That was the only way I could explain seeing those marks. After that day, I refused to sleep in my room. For the next 2 months, I slept in the living room with the lights on and wouldn't go to bed until the sun was up. A few months later, things went south with my friend, and I ended up moving back home to my childhood room. I thought I'd be safe there, but I was wrong. I brought the same bed with me. One night, I was sleeping, facing the inside of the room, when I was jolted awake by a noise. It was the sound of something dragging its feet across the carpet, pacing back and forth right next to me. Suddenly, I felt it. Something was right in my face, growling and breathing heavily. Then it moved away, only to come back again, growling louder each time. This happened several times before it finally stopped. I kept my eyes shut the entire time, too terrified to look. A few weeks later, my stepmom gave me a Sacred Heart charm, blessed in everything. She told me to wear it all the time and never take it off. Then, she hugged me tight and said she loved me. Months later, we were outside smoking and drinking when she asked if anything had happened since then. I told her no, and that's when she told me something that still gives me chills. The night before she gave me the charm, she said I had scared her. According to her, I came into her room around 3 or 4 a.m., pushed the door open, and just stood there in the doorway. She woke up and asked if I was okay or needed anything, but I didn't respond. I just stood there for about a minute, then turned around and walked back to my room. To this day, I have no idea what that was about or what any of these encounters really were. For context, the previous owner of my mom's house had died in her room. My nephew, who was 6 at the time, used to talk to someone in that house. I'd be babysitting, and while I was downstairs getting him a snack, I'd hear him having a full-on conversation with someone. Once, I stopped just short of entering the room so I could listen, but the floorboard creaked, and he went silent. My sister always said he would wave goodbye to someone when he left his room. Sometimes, when it was just the 2 of us downstairs, I'd hear footsteps in the room upstairs. So, yeah, that's my story, or stories, really. I hope you found them interesting. I sure didn't enjoy living through them, though. Story 4. During my freshman year of college, I lived in a sorority house on campus. The setup was pretty typical for on-campus housing, with keys similar to those used for dorm halls. Each of us had our own room, and our bathrooms were Jack and Jill style, connecting to another room. I always made sure to keep my bathroom door locked, so what happened next was really strange. One day, after getting back from my 8 a.m. calculus class, I decided to take a nap. I was exhausted and fell asleep quickly, but when I woke up, something felt off. I realized I couldn't move anything except my eyes. Panic started to set in, and that's when I felt a hand on me. Then I heard a voice say, "Hey, get up. You're running out of time." I couldn't see anyone, and the feeling of being unable to move was terrifying. The voice sounded so real, but I was completely alone. The experience left me shaken, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Another strange incident happened in that same house. My boyfriend was spending the night, and he was fast asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling thirsty, and was about to get up when he suddenly sat up. Without saying a word, he put his arm over me and stared at the corner of the room for about 20 seconds. Then, just as suddenly, he collapsed back onto the bed and fell asleep. Now, this might have seemed like typical sleep behavior, except for one thing: it was the same corner that my cat often stared at, as if something was there that only she could see. My sorority eventually closed down because of low numbers, and my grades weren't great, so my parents made me move back home and attend community college. Looking back, I couldn't help but think about that voice in the house, warning me that I was running out of time. It felt like more than just a creepy experience. It was almost like a sign.